Hello, everyone. Welcome back to On the Fly team, particularly in a bunch of trades that have happened during this NHL trade deadline day. So with that being said, we'll sort of hop into it in just a little bit. However, we're going to sort of give an overview here with 19 trades today, not necessarily the biggest of trades. We've seen a lot of the big names go earlier this week, and I sort of expect that to continue. We've seen that over the last few years where the big names sort of ship out a few days before, which sort of leaves for an anticlimactic NHL trade deadline. But with that being said, obviously still a fun day full of lots of trades. And one of the big things I think we've realized is, yes, a lot of the contending teams are sort of looking for their cap. A lot of the rebuilding teams are sort of just staying quiet for the time being. They got their big assets out and are sort of just taking a look, one final look to see who might not be returning, and that's sort of who moves on deadline day. But before we get into it, I'm going to ask you guys all to put down in the comments below who you think the biggest winners and losers are of the NHL trade deadline. That's over the last few days. And also, let me know what your thoughts are on all the trades that happened today. Other than that, we'll hop right on into it, starting with the first trade of the day. Not really of today, more of yesterday. However, once we recorded the video, of course, the trade gets announced. So that's between the Chicago Blackhawks and the Dallas Stars. So the Blackhawks do receive Anton Khudobin, as well as a 2025 second-round pick in exchange for Max Domi and Dylan Wells. So this deal, very, very interesting deal. Obviously, the Blackhawks sort of in that rebuilding stage. The Stars looking for a playoff push. Stars, yes, they are currently leading the Central Division. So it's curious to see sort of what they're up to today. I think it's a good deal in terms of what they're looking for. They're looking for both talent as well as a future asset. And I think Domi is exactly that. They got Khudobin, hasn't played yet for the Stars in the NHL, but an NHL guy. Look back in his time, yes, he was a pretty solid goaltender in Boston, never a starter in that sort of sense. But at the same time, he logged a lot of minutes for Boston, played a lot of games. And at the same time, you also get a 2025 second round pick. So I think it's a good deal for Chicago. You get a veteran guy who can sort of help out with your up and coming goalies, as well as a 2025 second round pick. Good return, in my opinion, for the Blackhawks. Stars get a guy like Domi. I really think that Domi's going to help the Stars a lot, especially as they push towards that playoff spot. But with that being said, in terms of the trade grades here, the Chicago Blackhawks, I'm going to give them an A. And as for the Dallas Stars, I'm going to give them an A minus. I just think the Blackhawks went a little bit more in terms of the value, that second round pick, really for a guy that you picked up in free agency, not necessarily guaranteed to come back. I think, in my opinion, that is why the Chicago Blackhawks deserve the A here. Dallas Stars get the A minus. Good deal for both sides. Move on along here for the second deal of this video, the first deal of today's trade deadline between the Detroit Red Wings and the St. Louis Blues. So yeah, Jacob Vrana in exchange for Dylan McLaughlin, as well as a 2025 seventh round pick. So this deal, yes, Vrana hasn't been necessarily sharp this year. He's gone through a few off ice issues. At the same time, St. Louis is taking a flyer on him, taking a shot in the dark. You never know what's going to happen with Vrana. If they do well, I think Vrana has a shot at coming back. At the same time, you give him a place, sort of a change of scenery from his place in Detroit. He was traded a few years ago at the trade deadline from the Washington Capitals. So that's one of the big reasons, I think, for this move. Vrana hasn't necessarily thrived as much as he did back in Washington. So this deal, I think, for the most part, give Vrana a change of scenery. I think he's going to at least thrive in it as much as he can. And for the Blackhawks, you get some return for it. McLaughlin isn't necessarily going to be your standalone guy. Seventh round pick, not necessarily going to be standalone. But overall, I think it's a decent trade for the most part, especially for the Blues. I like the upside. Very little downside, I think, for the Blues here. The Red Wings, yes, you sort of lose one of your better players that you thought was going to be, but you get some prospects and some picks back. So overall, in terms of the trade grades, I'm going to give the Blues here an A minus. I think just the upside of Vrana, regardless of sort of what's going on off the ice right now, I think once he can figure that out, I think it's going to be a smooth ride for Vrana, especially as he moves ahead here. However, with the Detroit Red Wings, I'm going to give them here a B minus. I just think the upside could have been used a little bit more in terms of what the Red Wings could have got back. Nonetheless, that's the trade grade for this deal. And as we move along here to the next deal of today between the New Jersey Devils and the Vancouver Canucks. So the Devils do receive Curtis Lazar in exchange for a 2024 fourth round pick. And this deal, I'm a big fan of for both teams. I think the value is spot on the money here. Lazar is a very good bottom six forward. We've seen him with a bunch of teams over the last little while. And I think in terms of what the Canucks are looking for, you get a pretty good pick. You get a 2024 fourth round pick. You get in a draft where, yes, obviously this is next year's draft looking ahead. But at the same time, you don't really know what you're looking at quite yet in terms of what you're looking at in the fourth round. And fourth round picks are sort of where it gets to the point where, yes, you could get a really, really good player. You could get someone that's really bad, or you could get someone in the middle. And then as we move along, sort of either way, then that becomes sort of where it's either a really bad pick, really good pick. There's no sort of middle line. And I think the fourth round pick for Lazar is a really, really good pickup. And Devils get a really solid bottom six player who's going to help them a ton when it comes to the playoffs. And I'm assuming they make it, of course, but I sort of see the Devils making the playoffs this year, sort of sitting in that second, third seed in the Metro. But with that being said, in terms of the trade grade here, I'm going to give both teams a B+. No clear winner of this deal, but both teams get a lot better. So overall, B+ for both sides here. As we move along here, trade between the LA Kings and the Philadelphia Flyers. So Brendan Lemieux and a 2024 fifth round pick go to the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for Zach McEwen. So this deal is one of those deals where, yes, you could argue good deal, bad deal, however you want to call it. But I think overall, both teams are sort of getting what they put into it. Lemieux isn't necessarily going to be your standalone guy, but McEwen isn't either. He's sort of, both guys are sort of fourth, third line players. They're not necessarily going to blow your socks off. I think McEwen will help a little bit more for the time being, where Lemieux is more of a long-term play for the Flyers, which is why I think they really took this deal. Overall, I think the deal is very, very balanced. I don't really see a clear winner here. I'm going to give the Kings here a B+. I think McEwen's going to help a little bit with that toughness as you look ahead. As for Lemieux and the fifth round pick, I think it's going to be a B. I don't really see the Flyers being the clear-cut winners. I think the Kings win by a slight margin just because it's a win-now move where Lemieux's sort of a long-term play with the Flyers. You also get a fifth round pick. So overall, I think it's sort of a B+ and a B situation between the LA Kings and the Philadelphia Flyers for that deal. And we'll sort of skip the Nathan Schnarr deal as well as Frederick Allard. Both players, AHL guys, not going to be doing too much for their NHL clubs anytime soon. So we'll skip over that one. With yet another deal here between the Pittsburgh Penguins, Montreal Canadiens, and San Jose Sharks. So the Penguins acquire Nick Bonino at 75% retained in exchange for a 2023 seventh round pick, a 2024 fifth round pick. There's a condition on the fifth round pick, hasn't yet been announced, in exchange for basically, and then the other part of this deal was the other 50%. So what happened there was Tony Sund in 2024 fifth came from San Jose, and Arvid Henriksen went back from Montreal. So that's how they sort of got the 50%. So an interesting deal there. Obviously, Bonino returning back to Pittsburgh. We want to see that HBK line back again. But with that being said, it's not happening this year, unfortunately. But Pittsburgh gets their guy back in Bonino. We'll see if he can help like he did back in the day when, obviously, 2015, 2016, where Bonino was sort of a force to be reckoned with in Pittsburgh. So see if he can return there. I don't really see him being that. But at the same time, trade grades here, I'm going to give the Penguins here an A-. Canadians here, A+ whenever you get stuff for retaining salary for basically free. Always get an A+ for me. And San Jose Sharks, I'm going to give a B-. I just think they could have got a little bit more. They had to pay extra to get retained salary for the Penguins. So I think it could have got a little bit more value there for a guy like Bonino. But at the same time, B-, pretty good overall. And we'll sort of move along here to the next deal, which is a very interesting one between the San Jose Sharks and Winnipeg Jets with Vladislav Mestikov in exchange for a 2025 fourth round pick. We look back, the Sharks actually acquired Mestikov from the Tampa Bay Lightning in exchange for Eyssimont. So with that being said, sort of a flip and flop move here. Sharks get now their 2025 fourth round pick, which I do like. I think it's probably going to help them a little bit more than Mestikov would, just in terms of their own sort of timeline. But at the same time, good deal for both sides. The Winnipeg Jets get a pretty solid bottom six sort of guy. I think he'll help the Jets a lot more in terms of sort of their defensive side. They have their top six pretty solidified with the addition of Niederreiter. So I think Nemesnikov's sort of their bottom six addition here. I think it's a good deal for the Jets. I think it's a good deal for the Sharks. Both teams will get a B+. No clear winners here. Move on along here. We're going to ignore the Anaheim Ducks, Buffalo Sabres deal, Dallas Stars, San Jose Sharks. Both deals won't really affect the NHL teams. And now we will get to sort of a quick deal here between the Leafs and the Flames. Dryden Hunt was now a Calgary Flame in exchange for Radim Zohorna. So with this being said, this deal isn't really too much to write home about. Dryden Hunt Didn't really see the NHL too much in Toronto. Red Wings and Hornet didn't really see too much time in Calgary. So the Leafs really acquired this for some center depth. You trade a winger, you get a center. Leafs get an extra center if they ever have some problems up the middle, which I don't really see them having that problem. But at the same time, they have so many wingers. It might be good for them to have a backup center option. You're sort of looking at a 5th, 6th, 7th option at this point for Hornet. And as for the Flames, just picking up a winger, it's never a bad idea. So that being said, I'm not really going to grade this. It's basically a B. No team's going to benefit a lot from this. No team's going to lose from this. But at the same time, good deal both sides, sort of just increasing their depth in both positions. Now look at the next deal between the Buffalo Sabres and Minnesota Wild. So the Sabres acquired Jordan Greenway in exchange for a 2023 second-round pick and a 2024 fifth-round pick. So this deal is an interesting one because we see the Sabres sort of making their push. Obviously, they're right on the cusp of that playoff berth, and we sort of see it's a very, very competitive Eastern Conference this year. Even the teams that aren't in it, you have Florida, who hasn't necessarily done too great this year, didn't make any moves this deadline, which was to me sort of interesting. You also have Ottawa, who's made a bunch of moves, really trying to be competitive. And then you have the teams that are already in. You have the Pittsburghs, the New Yorks, the New Jerseys, the New Yorks, the Washingtons, like all these teams. Obviously, Washington sort of fall off a little bit there, but at the same time, another team that, I mean, has a shot. They're not necessarily out right now. They have Ovechkin, who can always basically win you games. But at the same time, just an interesting sort of Eastern Conference this year, sort of interesting to see how teams react to the other teams trading. I think this is the Sabres way of sort of saying, yes, we're not going to go full in yet, but we're also going to make sure we have a push, because you never know, you could go on a hot streak. All of a sudden you can make the playoffs and then it's anybody's game. So interesting move here by the Sabres. I like the deal. I like the idea that I think they gave up a little bit too much for a guy like Jordan Greenway, but at the same time, good deal. Didn't have to worry about retaining salary, which I'm sure was a big sort of plus for the Minnesota Wild to trade with the Sabres. So overall, in terms of the trade grade, I'm going to give the Wild here an A. I think they are the clear-cut winners. It was an overpay, in my opinion, from the Sabres. And for the Sabres, I'm going to give them a B. I think they get what they're looking for. They did overpay a little bit, but I think Greenway is going to help them more than what they actually gave up. Patrick Brown for 2023, 6th-round pick, Flyers and Senators. I don't see this deal being overly crucial for the Senators. I think this is more sort of a depth move. If they need him, I don't see him Brown making the team right away, sort of playoff time. Someone gets hurt. I think that's where Brown comes in. With that being said, move on along here. Detroit Red Wings acquired 2023 4th-round pick for Oscar Sundqvist for the Minnesota Wild. So this very, very interesting move here. I think the Wild, once again, have made a few moves today. We've sort of seen what they're looking at. I think Sundqvist was sort of the replacement for Greenway. But with that being said, interesting move. Obviously, the Wild, once again, are another team that are sort of on that cusp. Could make it in, might not make it in. They're in a playoff spot right now, but same time, they have the ability to do so, and I think that's sort of where they're looking right now. The Red Wings just trying to get as many picks as possible. I think they sort of underpaid, or they got less value than they should have for a guy like Sundqvist. But at the same time, I think it's a good deal both sides. Minnesota Wild get a B+. Red Wings get a B-. I just think the deal for the Wild was a little bit better. I think they could have got a 3rd-round pick even for a guy like Sundqvist, but nonetheless, I think it's sort of one of those deals where both teams are going to walk away happy. It's a B- for the Red Wings, B+ for the Wild. No teams are going to go home sad here. Another deal we have here is between the Anaheim Ducks and the Pittsburgh Penguins. So Dmitry Kulikov at 50% retained goes to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for Brock McGinn, a 2024 3rd-round pick. So this deal, in reality, is basically Kulikov for a 3rd-round pick. McGinn was placed on waivers earlier this week. So when we look at this deal, very, very interesting move here. I think overall what we're looking at with the Penguins, obviously they are in sort of a similar boat there with, as we sort of talked about, Buffalo, where they don't want to go all in, but they also don't want to sort of wait back and lose their shot. But at the same time, I think the Penguins are one of those teams that are right on that edge that, you know, they might win, they might get blown out in the playoffs, or they might go into full rebuild, or who knows, maybe they'll surprise everybody. They have Crosby, they have Malkin. When you have those two players, absolutely anything can happen. So that being said, interesting move. I like the move. You bolster up your defense. You lose McGinn. You're going to lose him anyway, probably to waivers. If not, it's a cap dump. So it's a 3rd-round pick, not going to kill you. I like the deal for the Penguins. I'm going to give them a B+. Ducks, B+ as well. Kulikov, I think, could have got a little bit more value, but nonetheless, it's a good return, 2024 3rd-round pick. The next deal we're going to take a look at here is between the Colorado Avalanche and the New York Rangers. So the Avalanche to receive Gustav Rydal exchange for Anton Bleed, and I really like the deal for the Rangers here. Toughen up that bottom six forward group in Anton Bleed, sort of a rough and tough, rock'em sock'em type player. And I think it's going to help the Rangers a lot, especially come playoff time where you're sort of looking down that lineup. He's not necessarily going to be your sort of slotting guy. He'll play sort of that two-way role. I think he's going to play in terms of his contract a lot more two-way, going to be up and down the lineup. But at the same time, he's going to be that bottom six guy. He's going to play real rock'em sock'em hockey. He's going to hit. He's going to finish every check. He's going to play the game the right way. And I think the Rangers are really going to enjoy him, sort of what he's going to be able to do. And as for the Avs, Rydal, not necessarily anyone to write home about. I don't really see him being there in terms of the Colorado team right now. I think there might be potential for him. Once again, if injuries hit and all these other things, there is still a potential for him, but I do sort of highly doubt that will be the case. However, in terms of trade grades here, we're going to give Colorado here a B, Rangers B+. In my opinion, I just like the Rangers and Bleed more just because seeing him in action, I know what he can do, and I do enjoy sort of how he plays the game the right way. With that being said, we have two trades left here that we're going to talk about today, with the Arizona Coyotes acquiring Brett Ritchie and Connor McKay in exchange for Nick Ritchie and Troy Stecher. Yes, brothers, Nick Ritchie and Brett Ritchie, both brothers. First time, actually, where two brothers have been traded for each other. Interesting fact there. So with this being said, this deal is an interesting deal. I love the deal for the Flames. They get another tough player, playoff hockey type player, Nick Ritchie, who has been a little bit streaky at times. When he finds his groove, he's unstoppable. When he's sort of in that slump, you'll never see him. He's going to play fourth, fifth, sixth line even. He's never going to see the ice, basically, is what I'm trying to get at here. But at the same time, you get a guy like Troy Stecher as well, who's not necessarily going to be your standalone guy, but at the same time, he's going to be a really good depth option. If someone gets hurt or, anything goes up the wazoo, Troy Stecher's there. Ritchie, I think, will actually slot in for Calgary. And you don't lose too much. Brett Ritchie is not really going to be too much of a benefactor. Connor McKay, sort of the similar boat. This trade isn't too big in terms of actual value, but I think the Flames are going to enjoy it a lot more just with sort of the way Stecher and Ritchie play. A lot more rock'em sock'em hockey. Big fan of rock'em sock'em hockey. But at the same time, good deal for both sides there. I think the Flames are the slight winners. I'm going to give them an A-, while the Coyotes get a B. They don't necessarily lose this deal, but at the same time, they definitely do not win this deal. So with that being said, I'll move on to the final trade of today. And this was one that I was certainly waiting on because I expected it to be executed a little bit earlier. Actually, I was expecting it to go with the rest of the defensemen, but that is John Klingberg at 50% retained to the Minnesota Wild in exchange for Andrei Schuster, Nikita Nesterenko, and a 2025 fourth round pick, which is Minnesota's pick. So with that being said, this deal is another one of those interesting deals, and obviously the Wild, once again, bolstering up. We've seen them make a few moves today, so it's sort of one of those things where, yes, good deal for the Wild. Obviously, they're trying to get better. But Klingberg has not been good at all. Nothing like he was in Dallas. So we'll see if that change of scenery is going to help him. He wanted to take the one-year deal, say, let me prove myself to you. Flunked out, has had, frankly, an embarrassing year in Anaheim. But nonetheless, it's sort of what we're dealing with here. The return here is abysmal for the Anaheim Ducks, but at the same time, a bad contract, a player that hasn't performed, you're going to get a cheap option. Schuster, not going to be very important in this deal for the Ducks. Nesterenko, similar, still sort of can be a player that might have a little bit of value tied to him if he can figure it out, sort of make his way as a prospect. And I'll see a 2025 fourth round pick. We've seen a lot of defensemen go a lot better and worse defensemen go for a lot more. So at the same time, an interesting deal. I'm a big fan of this deal for the Wild. They're going to get the A+ as the final trade grade of the 2022-2023 trade review series. And with that being said, the Anaheim Ducks are going to get the final one with a big whopping D+. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you'd like to drop a like, if you really like to consider subscribing, tell all your friends and comment down below your thoughts on the trades. Until next time, see you.